But for a lot of people, spending 10, 50 hours learning how to code is not to put them in a position where they can actually build something. And so because people realized that and the tool became better, then it became fairly obvious that, oh, there is maybe something interesting with no code. When we started in 2012, people thought we were crazy, like literally. Like, oh, you're losing your time, everybody's gonna learn how to code. You know. And look at the room today.
Maybe the best way to start to talk about the impact of no code on founders is to hear it from a founder. So maybe Charles, you can take us through sort of the way you used Bubble. Is it on?
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. Cool.
So yeah, maybe take us through the how you got started with Comet and why you chose to go with a no-code tool and how it impacted the development of your company.
Yep. So hi everyone. I'm one of the co-founders of Comet, also the CEO. I'm a former engineering student, but honestly, I was like really dumb and I didn't know anything about code. Like we've learned code, but when we started the company, it was in 2016. We were 3 at the beginning, 3 friends from the engineering school. But but honestly, we didn't know anything about like product development, engineering, and like stuff. So, and our vision and our idea was quite simple because we wanted to like seamlessly match like hard skills freelancers with companies, and so it's like a marketplace. So we said we don't need any like deep tech or everything. So we say let's like bootstrap the company, and also thanks to the family because we joined the family maybe after 2 weeks, and we've learned a lot thanks to the family. And so we said, okay, we don't need like a deep tech or hard technology to like quick start the project. So honestly, we went through internet and on Product Hunt, I think so. Like we found Bubble. And one of the 3 co-founders, Joseph, he took the lead on Bubble, and it was started like, so we started like this. And
that was when?
I think like it was in late 2016, in December 2016, and we used Bubble for more than 18 months, like 18. And we are still using Bubble today, and we will discuss about it. But all our operations and all the company was running on Bubble for at least 1.5 years. And as you said before, we went from 0 to 500,000 euro of monthly volume on Bubble. So you can build really something strong thanks to this kind of tool.
And what was the moment where you decided to move away from Bubble? I know you hired a CTO and you hired a dev team. What pushed you to move to your own sort of hard-coded product?
Honestly, 2 things. I think one good and maybe one bad things, because the good thing is like we met someone. We met Arnaud. It's also one of our co-founders today, but he joined the company after 1 year and 1.5 years. So we met Arnaud. He's like a developer. He's today our CTO, and we met him, and he told us, you know, if you want to really scale this, if you want to like grow 10 times more, you need to build something in-house. So it was like really interesting to discuss with him about this. And the bad thing was like to scale, because I think it's possible maybe to you know, scale a little your product on low-code product. So, but Arnaud wanted like to transform a little the company, allowing us to become a true tech company at the end. And we discovered also some parts that needed, you know, like in-house development. So Arnaud, when he joined the company, it was in like late 2017, and he started to like code by himself the most important parts, like the most difficult ones. And after he started in 2018 to build the tech team.
So by most difficult, you mean where your need was very specific and you needed to...
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly, like really specific, and mostly like about data stuff or like backend stuff, because we had like a lot of scrapping topics, and so he developed a lot of Chrome plugins and everything. And at one point, he told us, we need to merge everything and to have something cleaner. So he wanted to build like a tool, a global tool. So that's it.
Okay. Emmanuel, I imagine with Bubble being one of the most complex sort of no-code products and the one that you can use to do the most things.
Let's not say complex, let's say advanced.
Advanced, yes. Powerful.
Powerful.
With Bubble being one of the most powerful tools, what's your opinion of the argument that comes back all the time that no-code doesn't scale?
It's just about time, honestly.
Okay.
In late 2017, I don't think we were definitely not as good as we are today. At that time, it probably was a wise decision to move off. Today, if you were starting today, I'm not sure you would have to, honestly, because as you make the product more scalable and more reliable, the trade-offs is less and less obvious to migrate off the platform. So yeah.
And
there's no theoretical limit where you can do this. And the way it's built, I'm not actually a fan of no-code as a denomination because no-code implies that there is no code at all. Truth is, there can be if something is missing. So imagine you want to build like a marketplace. The marketplace component is pretty simple. It's going to be buyers and sellers. But then if you want to start having like a complicated pricing algorithm, that's where you would add some code. But you could do that on top of us, for instance. That's the long-term vision. The long-term vision is not to say engineers don't exist anymore. The long-term vision is to say engineers should focus on what actually matters, where you need code, and other things you don't need code. If you have that, then you can scale, honestly, to the limit.
And so from your current users, do you have some examples maybe that could help us understand like the use that they make of Bubble and how far they can take it? What's the most impressive Bubble product that you've seen? Yeah,
well, that's the example I use. I'm waiting for Comet to exceed that bar, but that's a high one. Our most successful client financially started on us in 2014. It's a fairly complicated web platform where people apply to get a loan when they install a solar panel on their roof, and installers can use the same platform as a CRM, basically, to see all the different projects that have been approved or not, and that they want to install. And so the business model is to sell loans, basically, and they've processed over $1 billion of loans. They have about 100 people today. They got acquired 3 years ago, and they're still running on us today. So in terms of scale, it certainly scales. It hasn't been easy every day, especially with them, because I started in 2014, so we had to do a lot of custom things for them to make sure it works. But the beauty of the model is once we would do something for them so that they could scale, everybody else would benefit. So they actually were like our guinea pigs in many, many ways. And now for
drove
other
your
people.
roadmap, I imagine.
But yeah, and that makes the platform more reliable for the next ones.
Cool. Very, very interesting. Maybe, I think you can take. So Clément, so since you work with different clients across many different industries and you help them solve different problems, I know you use Bubble a lot, but are there any other tools that sort of make it onto most of the stacks that you work on?
Yeah, of course. We don't start on Bubble. Now we work mainly on Bubble because it's a powerful product, like Emmanuel said, it's true. But you have many others, and they are powerful. Some, for example, you have some Webflow and different others. They all have more pro and cons, I think. So yeah, we definitely use different kind of tools.
And do you see an empty space somewhere? Is there a type of use case that you don't find a no-code solution for today? Because we see a new no-code product come out every week, basically every other day, even. Is there what's the next frontier?
Actually, today you have an empty space between the design and the powerful of back-end and the front-end solution in no-code. You have Bubble, which is the more powerful to manage back-end, and basically most of the only one. And you have Webflow, which is awesome to do a great design and be able to do what, no matter what creative want to do. So yes, on this part you have something missing, and maybe on the mobile part you have a bit of space. Actually, Adalo come to help it, but there is a bit of space on mobile too.
Is mobile something that you're trying to do better?
Yeah, definitely. The question is when. I'm hoping 2021, but I can't commit on that. It's a hard one. On the good news, though, is that mobile web is, well, first of all, we work very well on mobile if you do a website, like a web application. And also, cell phones have gotten better and better, and so mobile web works in general greatly, very well on mobile, which was not the case, 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But that's definitely on the roadmap.
Cool. I want to go back to maybe what you said earlier, Charles. So you said you're still using Bubble. So even if you moved off for sort of the core product, what's the use case that you have now of Bubble?
I think it's the most powerful tool when you want to try something. And when you build a company, so in the early days, like you want one thing, you want to reach your product market fit. And I think because it needs tons of iterations and everything, I think local tools are awesome for this. But when you find when you have found your product market fit, even 2 or 5 years later, you will need to improve it, and you will discover new pains for your users. So you will have to build new solutions also. You will have to improve your current product with new features, new ID, new solutions. And Bubble is also awesome for this. It's awesome to discover the core product market fit. But even and mostly when you are a marketplace, you have 2 sides. And because we work with enterprises and startups, and we work with a lot of different freelancers, we have a lot of persona, and so a lot of product market fit. So we use Bubble today also to, start new solutions, new ideas, and mainly in the product team, because today we have a really huge, not huge, but really strong engineering team, and so we have a roadmap and everything. We have a lot of users running on the product, so we can't stop everything and start something new with the tech team. So Bubble is a powerful tool for the product team today to start new things. But also it can be for the marketing team. I think we don't use it a lot on the marketing team, but mainly on the enterprise side. Johan, our head of brand, is really, really strong also. And during the strike, recently, he built a website really quickly to make something about the remote work. And it was really successful. He built the Slack, he bootstrapped a lot, something about the strike, about the remote work and why remote is awesome for companies. And it was it had a huge traction. And I think he will follow up, and he should follow up on this project on Bubble to go forward.
No, and it's interesting what you were saying about the product roles, and we were talking about it earlier with Emmanuel. Today, it makes more sense for someone to learn how to use Bubble in a few days than go to a coding bootcamp, for example, if building a company is what you want to do. But that also means that skills on the product side are becoming more and more actionable within companies. And so do you see that you empower your product team by using Bubble?
Honestly, yes, because it's not merging tech and product into the same team, but sometimes it's like this. It's not as powerful as the data team or the tech team, but it gives to the product team a new weapon, and allowing them to ship something, to gather some data, and so to see if they are going in the good direction or not. So I think power teams should use low-code tool, and honestly Bubble, because it was a good story. No, and because I think a true product manager should be able to ship something by himself or by yourself, and you are more powerful if you you want to if you want me to fund your project, for example, internally, and you come with like no data, nothing, just a gut feeling, that's cool. But if you come with like an MVP and some like datas and first users, it's easier for me to like start this project.
And it's the same thing for funds. If you're trying to build your company, of course, the more you can prove. I mean, not having a CTO is just no longer an excuse. I think we all agree on that. And is that something you see in your user base? In terms of, do you know if Bubble users are mostly product people? What's the typical Bubble user? I imagine it's very.
They're mostly actually business people that have a product intuition. So most of them don't really have like a formal product manager training, but they're more, like they went to business school, colleges. They're not necessarily super educated in terms of like educational background. Like some of them don't have many degrees. But what they have, which is something you need to learn, like back to the point we were just making, it's not like no code makes everything easy, but it makes the hard thing something that you can figure out without 10 years of, or 5 years of technical training to learn how to code. They have an intuition of what is a product what kind of product people want, what is the right flow that makes sense for the user, and they iterate on that faster using a no-code tool. So in general, they tend to be fairly analytical. I would say if they can use Excel and PowerPoint, that's honestly the kind of skill set you need to have, but then you need to learn the tool and really try to put yourself in the shoes of the user as you're building it and make sure you understand, you design properly the different steps so that it makes sense for the user.
Okay. And at Copilot, is that what you hire for, product people, or what sort of, I don't know if you have a team already or if it's just you and your co-founder?
Yeah, we have, it's freelancer based mainly. Basically, sometimes more technical people, honestly, but I think it might change. Maybe they were on board sooner on this, but I think it will change. Maybe less technical people will masterize the Bubble tools, for example, and other no-code tools. So yeah, it will open the market on that type.
Historically, we actually try to stay away from developers, like technical people, because they tend to be a little bit more trouble at first, especially in the early days, because they're going to see, when you try to create a tool like this, you have to do things fairly non-traditionally. And technical people that have spent many years learning how to code, you're kind of going against some of the principles they learned at school. And so you don't want necessarily to spend too much time with them because they're going to be trouble. Most seriously, the reason why we didn't do this is because if you go to a technical person with a tool like Bubble, which is fairly powerful today, but 7 years ago or 5 years ago, it was not that powerful, obviously, compared to what it is today. Technical people will see limitations first. They might say, oh, it's cool. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit faster to build, but hey, what if I want to do this? And because they have an option to do something else, they're going to run away. If you go to people that don't have any other way to create anything, like non-technical people, they don't see the limitations. They see the empowerment first. They're like, oh my God, now I can do this. Because before that, they could do nothing. And so they're going to stick with you even though you have some limitations. So on that one, we're actually, I think, the only tool back then to target non-technical people. Most of the other tools that have disappeared now, honestly, I think for that reason. Because when we started, there were like 2 other no-code tools that started maybe a year after us, but they made, I think, the mistake to go for technical people and exactly had the issue I just described. So today it's different because today the product is in a better shape, and eventually, because now you can extend the platform with code, we also want engineers to use us, but it's probably less than 5% of our users today have a technical background.
Yeah, and of course you need also developers in your team to build. Yeah. I mean, there is code somewhere.
And it's actually a challenge.
To find developers that want to work on no-code tools?
No, to make sure that your developers know the product well. So we actually wrote, maybe we'll make it public one day, we wrote a test that people have to take part of the onboarding to make sure they know
Bubble before they join.
About 90% of the features we have, and it takes about like a week or 2 to finish. So it's pretty comprehensive. Because before we did that, we realized that some of our engineers had no idea of some of the features we had because they're not part of the target user base.
And of course, I mean, no-code kind of abstracts away the code. And imagine, I mean, I'm not a technical person, but I imagine technically it must be harder to build than a typical SaaS product. Are there some challenges on that front that are unique to building no-code tools?
Yeah, I mean, everyone would tell you that what they do is the most difficult thing in the world. I mean, I don't know if what we do is harder than, machine learning or stuff like that. It certainly requires engineers, and if we have engineers here, even though they have to be allowed to work in the US, I'd love to talk to them. But people that have like very strong abstraction capabilities, because you have to create new layers, and that takes a specific kind of engineer. One of the, I would say technically the biggest challenges we have is because of the choice we've made of being extremely open-ended and letting people do pretty much what they want, is that you have to create a system that's going to be resilient to all the crazy things that people do. And I saw a lot of crazy things. Like I saw people doing apps, for people that are familiar a little bit with our language, like with literally 1,000 elements on the page and complaining that the app was slow. And we were like, yeah, but you know. We tell them to fix that, but we also don't, it's kind of the purpose of the company to make sure it works regardless of the crazy things they do. So that's why it's hard for the engineers, because you have to optimize things behind the scene.
Sure. Maybe if we go back to Clément and sort of the people that you work with, what's the rate between founders of startups and the rest? Is it mostly startups?
Yes, today is mostly startup and only startup. Not because there is only startup for that, but just because we decided to focus only on startup for now, and maybe after other. But we have some other type of clients who are asking for no code. There is not only startup.
And so what you help them do is sort of transform the ideas of what they want to prove into a product without them writing code and without you writing a little bit of code, just leveraging those tools, and then you give them the control of the product, or do you maintain it as well?
Not really. First of all, when someone have an idea, we just say, build your stuff, take no-code tools, do it yourself. And when you have some businesses, when you need to improve it, when you need iteration, when you need to be faster, and when you need to delegate it, we are here to help you, and we can build better products in no-code tools like Bubble after you were on the London one, for example. But first of all, they have to prove they have a business, because we don't want to take their money and just build something which might not work the weeks after. So it's not the point. Mm. So yeah, of course, when we deliver the product.
So, yeah, but how do you know what proof do you need that they have a business?
Make money, make money. Have your first, make money. Make your first sale,
so
and
they
when
all
you have it,
probably have already used some of those tools. You just help them make the most of it and build more complex things from it.
Yeah, exactly. We help them to build more complex no-code tools, no-code stuff, but always no-code, but more complex. And what we do basically is we advise a lot the people before they build their first product with the no-code tools. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because I mean, in the past year or 2 years, we've seen this huge acceleration in the products that get funded, the products that get started, and the features of the already existing products. But I was surprised to hear that no-code agencies are still a thing, because it's supposed to make them available to anyone who has at least a minimum of product sense. Why do you think there's still room for agencies in that field?
Honestly, it was scary at the beginning, and we didn't start by an agency. We started by doing a tutorial on no-code, the first part. It was French Maker, the name, and we stopped it because many people just tell us, hey guys, okay, there is MakerPad, he do awesome tutorials, you do awesome tutorial, cool, but we just don't have the time to do those tutorials, and we still wanted to have our product. So can we just give you some money and you build it for us and that's it? And we said, why not? It can be a great idea. And we started like that, and it works well. And we love, I think we prefer personally to build products and let them take be live than just do tutorials and after that put the tutorial in the trash, because it's just a tutorial, it's not a real business you launch.
Okay, and so Charles, inside your company, if you're still using Bubble, for people that join your company or have never used Bubble before, how do you train them? Are there any resources? Do you have, where do you go to find which product to use and how?
like more globally, we have something in on the onboarding part when we hire someone and when he or she joins the company about like bootstrapping. So it's not only about the no-code stuff or Bubble or the low-code. It's more about bootstrap. It's first a mindset. So you have something about Zapier, you have something about JSheet, and because even the sales team, even the finance team, every teams has to bootstrap, because you can really like boost your productivity and you can like empower yourself professionally if you know how to bootstrap. So we don't have anything about Bubble. It's more something inside the product team and also on the tech team. I think one of the challenging parts in the database part, like we train them thanks to the engineering team, but it's not something really strong on the onboarding. It's more about the bootstrap mindset and how you can like work more efficiently, maybe work less to have the same results, or work the same but have better results.
Okay, so it's really a mindset thing. And
yeah, I think like honestly, you have tutorials, you have plenty of great content, even on Bubble. You can like follow the. So I think like if you want to try something and you have the mindset, like when we started Comet, we were like 3 friends, 25 years old, and we invested 1,000 euro, like 300 euro each. And we didn't know honestly anything about startups, products, digital world, and everything. So I think everyone, not anyone, but everyone has this. Like it just you have a problem and you want to solve it. Mm-hmm. So we just teach them during the onboarding how to get this mindset, mm-hmm. not how to use this particular tool. And a lot of sales today, when I talk with them inside the company, for example, they go on product hunt, mm-hmm. they use or they go on the Google Chrome store to find extensions, and so everybody is bootstrapping inside the company.
That's very cool. And within Bubble for new users, how do you make so? Because of course you can do so much with Bubble, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, and there is a learning curve. I mean, we'll never put on our website learn it in 5 minutes, build something in 5 minutes, and anyone that tells you that, just know that means you can't do too much. Because if you can do a lot of things, you have to learn how to use it a little bit. So in our case, we have some tutorials. It's okay. It's not great yet, to be honest. We're actually working on the new version of our, I don't know how we'll call it, probably something like university or Bubble curriculum, I don't know. But something to help users go through the initial 10 hours that we think are necessary to discover the superpowers. Because you do feel like you have superpowers after you spend that initial time. But that's where we lose most of our people. I mean, when we look at our funnel, the number of people, between signing up to actually using us is actually pretty low. So that's where we're focusing a lot of our energy. And it's going to be a combination of, written text, videos, potentially webinars. We'll see. We're experimenting on a bunch of things right now. The only thing I can say is, again, like, no pain, no gain. If you're not willing to learn, you're not going to be able to create things at some point. And people have forgotten that a little bit, because today we're in a culture where we're expecting things to be immediate, and like Apple is an amazing company, but they created a phone with only one button because that was easier to use. But if you think about going back to Excel, for instance, the first time people used Excel, they had to learn how to use it. But it's so obvious because it's such a big franchise that people would spend the time to learn it. Photoshop is the extreme. Like Photoshop, you basically have to take a degree in something before being able to use it. But then you have superpowers. And so it's going to be the same in no-code. No-code doesn't mean no learning. It means much more accessible and faster iteration.
And you briefly mentioned this beforehand, but I wanted to go back on the distinction in the name no-code.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of it. I prefer visual development or visual programming, personally. Okay. If you go to our website, that's actually what it says, in the Google Chrome tab bar. On the other hand, we're not going to fight it. I mean, if the press and everyone calls it no code, I'll play along because it's certainly easier for us today than it was like 5 years ago when no code was not a thing and people were telling us, why are you doing this? Because everybody's going to learn how to code. So I'm not going to complain, but I think visual programming is a better description of what it is. Because there's still, again, one of the things that makes us different from the other tools is the fact that you can do bugs in Bubble. Like if you make a mistake in your logic, you're not going to have the expected behavior. And because, in fact, we have a debugger. When you use Bubble, you have a debugger to understand why your application is behaving in such a way. And when we say bugs, it's not a code bug. It's really a Bubble bug, like a flaw in your logic. But the fact that you can do bugs means you need to know how to debug it. So you need to, again, learn, and that's why you're programming. If you're using a tool that doesn't let you go wrong, then you can build what you need, most of the time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I thought you wanted to say something? No.
Yeah, just wanted to add, I think you have different levels in no-code, really, and I think it's like everywhere. You said the example of Photoshop, it's a pretty good example. You can do basically something pretty simple with Photoshop, but to a massive design can be pretty hard, and I think it's the same way in no-code, definitely.
And, I mean, in the past year or year and a half, we've seen no code become a huge thing. I mean, I don't think we would have had this room if this event had been a year ago. As someone who's been building a no code tool for 7 years, 8 years, what do you think was the catalyst?
I think it's a combination of two things. The first thing, that tools became better. So the big thing we have to fight with no code is a skepticism around it, because no code is not a new idea at all. Like HyperCard, I think in '88 by Apple was no code. People have forgotten, but they were trying to let people program without writing code. Front Page in the '90s, Visual Basic in some ways had a little bit of code, but was much easier than the other tools. The problem is that all these tools have failed because people went back to actually teaching code in schools and people were starting companies using code. And so we have to fight that skepticism. And so you need to get to a product that is good enough to people to even try using you. So that's the first thing. Product got better, and so it's just a matter of time. And I think the other thing is, if you remember in 2012, it was like so cool to learn how to code. Like all governments were like, we're going to put everyone to learn how to code. Barack Obama was on TV literally, with a cap, code.org, and say, hey, I wrote some JavaScript today. And I think what people have discovered 5 years later, or now 8 years later, is that it doesn't work. Like you can learn, you can do like some, for some people that will be, their career path and they're gonna love it. But for a lot of people, spending 10, 50 hours learning how to code is not to put them in a position where they can actually build something. And so because people realized that and the tool became better, then it became fairly obvious that, there is maybe something interesting with no code. When we started in 2012, people thought we were crazy, like literally. Like, you're losing your time, everybody's gonna learn how to code. And look at the room today.
Yeah, no, of course. And I guess some of the skepticism also comes from engineers in a way, because I mean,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
You hear and I see it all the time. I really don't understand this argument, but in some way they're scared of losing their jobs, which is weird for the people that are actively creating the future.
I mean, I want to be clear. Engineers will never lose their job because we'll always need people that can actually write code.
It's just a better usage of
their time. In fact, we are the best friends of engineers because we spare them all the boring work of repeating the same thing again and again and again. When you see companies like Uber and Lyft, like Lyft is basically like, I don't think it exists in Paris, but it's basically the same as Uber. Like the fact that these two companies have engineers is very sad because we have
huge engineering teams.
They have thousands of engineers doing exactly the same product with Uber is black, Lyft is pink, but that's really the only difference. Like the flow is exactly the same. And it is really sad. So some engineers are scared because they are making very good money that way, but if they were not doing that, they would be actually doing something more useful, probably more impactful to the world in a good way, with a great salary as well. So there's no risk at all.
Especially when you take into account that like engineering is sort of the bottleneck of the business world today. Like it's the hardest position to hire.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it from a social perspective, the fact that all these very smart engineers are being used on like consumer web applications, because that's where investors are putting most of the money, is really sad. Like, I'm sure, you know, curing cancer probably requires some good engineers, and they should be working on this instead of, you know, delivering pizzas, because right now that's what they do. I mean, like, look at all those food delivery startups. Again, all those startups are all the same and should be using no code so that, you know, non-engineers can do that, so that engineers can focus on important, meaningful things.
And is that something that you see at Comet today, in the sense that your engineers, I think on one side you could have, you could say that either the product people requesting features or products from the engineering team are better informed because they've tried it with an MVP version, but also just simply like internal tools, they don't have to spend time building it and maintaining.
Yeah, I think like Emmanuel was very right when you talk about impact. Like engineers, you want to be useful, I think, as we all want, and you want to ship impact. So I think, you know, when you build something, you code something, and it doesn't work, or you have to maybe trash it because it's like not useful for the company. I think even like mostly on startups, when you are a tiny team and when each position is really super important for the company, and I think today everyone within the company wants to have a huge impact on our users, on the future of the company, and it could be really frustrating if you like code something for 1 month, or I don't know, 1 week, 1 month, and like it doesn't work. Like I think it's maybe when you talk with engineers, and we have like 5,500 freelancers in the community, all like engineers. And when even with freelancers, for example, when you work as a freelancer with a client who doesn't really know what he wants to build or everything, it's really frustrating. So I think today our engineers are really happy about Bubble or no-code stuff because they are more impactful today as they could be without any no-code tool. So, and better you are impactful, like better is your impact, better you are fulfilled also, I think so.
And do you have no-code engineers on your marketplace?
Honestly, not yet, because 90% of the demand side, like the companies, are enterprises, like large enterprises. And I think it's really sad because I love them. They are cool companies, but they spend billions of euros every year to build things that they won't work. Like sometimes they won't even use these tools. And so I think the enterprise world should really enter the no-code era, and they should train their marketing teams, their product teams, like their business teams. Because so we don't have a lot of, and we don't have true no-code engineers as freelancers today within the community because we don't receive the demand on the demand side. But maybe I think it will change also, because you know, for example, with Lion, like you have Lion for executives, and
It starts with mindset, and then
yeah, exactly. Like my talk to some executives today in France is like, you should start bootstrapping. You should like, you want to build this this app, this marketplace. Like stop trying to you know convince your managers, your comex, like just do something and just use Bubble. I think the challenge here. It's about the security and the compliance with the IT department. On the enterprise world, the difficulty is how can if I am the CIO of like a huge corp, how can I let and allow my users like to use a no-code tool without any security issue or without this kind of topics? I think so.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I mean, I'm currently working on a product I'm building, and like just the building a auth layer on top of a product today is quite challenging. I think maybe in your marketplace of extensions you have one to have accounts and have password combinations.
Yeah, well, I mean that's actually the most basic thing we have, but because any web application has account management, so yes.
Okay.
To the enterprise thing, it's just about time. Honestly, security. I mean, we have that company that I mentioned that has processed over $1 billion of loans. We have to be secure for them.
Yeah.
It's just they don't have the same requirements in terms of compliance because they're not worried of losing their job because they don't have the right compliance certificate, for the security solutions they use that the corporate world has. But that will change. Also, at some point, we'll start investing on that. Right now, it's not our focus. I think it's much more promising to work with a growing company because you can iterate faster. You don't lose your time doing these things for now because honestly, everyone that has been through those kind of compliance knows it's necessary, but it's extremely time consuming, so it slows you down. I mean, we're a small team, we have like 20 people, but we will go there one day. I personally think startups are more exciting because they're going to use you for like real things in production and they're going to push you to the limit in the right way because they're going to scale on you. Enterprise, they will use you, but if at some point they really need to run something in production, they will probably put some engineers on it. And so you lose like the success story. Like at this point, we're still looking for success stories. I mean, Comet is pretty well known in Paris, and so I use it all the time when I talk in France. But if at some point, a company of the scale of, Airbnb of 5 years ago, he started on us, I think my job is done. Like I don't need to do any communication anymore. User acquisition will be all fine. People will just flood our website. But so we're investing a lot of energy on the startups to get there, and then maybe an enterprise.
Yeah, and I think you have people like Clément who are also helping sort of spread the word.
Right. Yeah, and that would be more complicated in the enterprise world.
Yeah.
Everything would be secret. People wouldn't be sharing things openly. So a lot of reasons not to go there right now. But actually, some of our competitors are, and they probably make good money, but I think at some point they will plateau. If your goal is to change how programming works, you have to go beyond enterprise, and so starting with enterprise is dangerous because you're going to be trapped into this.
You mean as a revenue source, like you start focusing too much?
Yeah, I mean, when you can charge a company, like, I don't know, $50,000 or plus per year versus the average user on us that pays us like $800 a year, you're going to start focusing only on the big ones. So you have to, it's addictive. Money is addictive, so you don't want to be there too soon.
Okay. And maybe just to close this off, we can go around. What do you think is really the next level, next frontier for no-code tools today? What's capable of doing? Like what's the big limitation today?
Maybe, like you say, Emmanuel, maybe the next step is the big company make a foot in it. I think it will happen. We already have some contacts with people who really think about it, and in a good way. They have, for example, a big group have 30 projects they want to launch, and they select only 5 of them because they don't have the time and money to do everything.
So you have people working in big corporations that come to you and ask you to build stuff.
Yeah, of course, because you have the power with no code to be really fast, and 30 projects became possible if you are no code. So in that way, it will be the first step, I think, and the last one will be an Airbnb on a no code tool. Of course, this can be a pretty awesome stuff.
I think it's also on the tech teams part. Maybe it's not the same in the US, but today you have like still the opposition between the engineers and the no-code tools. And I think like when the engineers will understand that, okay, I think a good engineer knows that technologies, like they are tools. Sometimes if we don't care if you use JavaScript or PHP or everything, just use the right tools for the right problem to solve. And so when they will understand that Bubble or other no-code tools are also like engineering tools, and it's like JavaScript, but for other issues or other solutions. So I think it's also important for the engineering world to understand that the no-code is not like, because the business world is disappointed about the engineer, or because the business world wants to bypass the engineering world. So I think it would be a good step.
Okay. And then what can we expect from Bubble?
Well, I mean, we're working mostly right now on improving reliability and performance at scale, and then mobile. Our goal, what I communicate with the team earlier this year, we want to be in a position, it's ambitious, we'll see if we can do it within 2 years, to have half of startup creations, like web-based startup creations, to be on us versus traditional engineering. So that's what we're aiming for. Because at that point, if we have that, then the next Airbnb will be on us, like statistically 50%. We have a 50% chance, and it's not just one Airbnb per year. And then the technology will be proven. My goal is that no-code is not a thing in 5 years, and it's just a way to build things. Yeah.
But how is it spread out actually geographically, your user base?
For us, I mean, it's the US first, obviously, because we're based there, we're in English, and they tend to be early adopters. And then it's the UK. France is actually our third country, probably because I'm French, which helps a little bit in our communication in the early days. And then Canada, Australia, Germany. Emerging markets, surprisingly enough, India and Brazil are also pretty strong, which is interesting because when India, which is so big on outsourcing engineers, starts using a no-code tool to not outsource, that tells you that there is something wrong with outsourcing engineering. So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, thank you very much. That's all the questions I had.
Que la famille.